an open letter to the GlobeTards. Dear GlobeTards, I trust you are doing well. Before beginning, a caveat must be stated to clarify exactly whom this letter is addressed. A globetard is not just someone who believes the world is a spinning ball flying around in multiple directions at once through the infinite vastness of the theory of space-time. Well, practically everyone in the modern world believes this exact theory, and everyone who now understands the truth was once counted among the very ranks of the deceived. Globetards are the so-called people who spend all of their time with hundreds of sock puppet accounts, trolling flat earth threads and comment sections on videos, arguing to no end for the absurd theory that their ass is stuck to the side of a spinning ball in outer space. Globetards are those who refuse to acknowledge whenever a valid point is made against their religion of scientism. Once you've been introduced to the concept of a motionless planar Earth, yet you refuse to consider this concept or refuse to prove to yourself that the world is in fact a spinning ball, yet you spend all of your time arguing against people who know better, you might just be a globetard. We should also discuss exactly what it is the deceived must believe by default, whether or not they are aware of said beliefs. It lies beyond the comprehension of this writer how one can count themselves among the ranks of some group or espouse themselves to a given belief system without fully comprehending the basic tenets of that system. As El Guapo says, how can you tell me I have a plethora if you do not know what a plethora is?
Jefe! The German arrived yet?
Not yet, Guapo. Many presents have been coming for your birthday.
German has the only presents I want. Guns! Guns, so that the name of El Guapo will be hanging on everyone's lips.
He will be here, Guapo. But I think you will like your other presents, too. I have put many beautiful piñatas in the storeroom, each of them filled with little surprises.
Many piñatas?
Oh, yes, many!
Would you say I have a plethora of piñatas?
A what?
A plethora.
Oh, yes. You have a plethora.
Jefe, what is a plethora?
Why, Guapo?
Well, you told me I have a plethora. And I just would like to know if you know what a plethora is. I would not like to think that a person would tell someone he has a plethora and find out that that person has no idea what it means to have a plethora.
Forgive me, Guapo. I know that I, Jefe, do not have your superior intellect and education. But could it be that once again, you are angry at something else and are looking to take it out on me?
Like what, Jefe?
Could it be because you are turning 40 today?
No.
Could it be because Carmen chooses to sleep in her cell instead of with you?
So according to these beliefs, the Earth has a diameter of about 8,000 miles and is a sphere housed in outer space which spins and orbits, etc. The spin alone amounts to some 1,000 miles an hour at the equator, and, well, half the speed is the hour hand on a 12-hour clock at the pole. There is no direct evidence of this disparity in edge velocity on the spinning ball Earth, yet it is assumed as a fact. Another assumption is that light always travels in straight lines when convenient to the argument, yet light bends sometimes, but only when it's convenient to your argument. You believe that the Earth is moving up towards your feet in the morning at 6,600 miles per hour, and that the Earth is moving down away from your feet in the evening at 6,600 miles an hour. A total acceleration of over 132,000 miles per hour, which we should experience constantly throughout every second of every day. You believe that the universe was created from nothing by chance, and that our oldest ancestor is ultimately a rock, or some primordial ooze of natural amino acids, water, and carbon, molecules which randomly organize themselves into complex, intelligently written code, which allows for relatively simple materials to organize themselves out of their own volition into multi-organ system life forms, which have awareness, intelligence, and also self-replicate, by chance. The world has thus organized itself around the premise that the omnipotent men of science have concluded by some experiment that our genesis and the genesis of all the hypothetical worlds in space, zipping around far larger and more remarkable suns than ours, is due to chance and gravity and chaos. Society somehow deems those who read science in a book and repeat science are somehow more scientific or even intelligent than those of us who question what was written in the books, especially should we find a discrepancy between said dogma and reality. And finally, the social media giants, such as the very platform upon which you're probably watching this now, have decided that it is not only foolish and ignorant to question the very nature of the world within which we all exist, they have deemed it dangerous to the degree that they must step in and take action against we foolish flat earthers. I honestly don't believe YouTube could do a greater service to the flat earth movement than to disown it, as they will inevitably force the hand of flat earthers to abandon the quagmire of common social media platforms and migrate over to either smaller sites, which will become future juggernauts, forcing said common platforms towards the way of Napster and MySpace. The globe Earth theory entails one single piece of observable evidence to base its entire foundation, and that is to say that the heavens apparently rotate around Polaris in the north and some indiscernible point in the south. The entire latitude-longitude system is built around observations of the heavens, observations which can be mapped into a celestial sphere, comprising the heavens and setting the foundational basis for the globe Earth theory, where the celestial lights are effectively infinitely distant, or they can be mapped to a celestial plane, where the celestial lights are comparably local. Each assumption requires one caveat statement, that is to say, for the former, that light from the celestial objects must, for all intents and purposes, travel in absolute straight-line paths from the celestial object to the eye of the beholder, or conversely, in the latter, that light will certainly bend when propagating through variable temperature or density media, as shown by multiple experiments. The entirety of the ball Earth argument is founded upon the erroneous and outdated assumption that light must always travel in a straight line path. GlobeTards love to harken back to ancient philosophers such as Eratosthenes up to Galileo, who would have both been born in an era prior to the scientific acknowledgement of refraction of light, which is a direct factor in fashioning the illusion of curvature, as well as fashioning scores of generations of people devoid of any real understanding of the natural world and the unattainable universe beyond. Anyone who takes the position, the shape of the world doesn't directly affect me or my day-to-day life, so it's not worth looking into, really needs to reconsider their position. To say that it, quote, makes no difference that practically the entire world has a fundamental misunderstanding of the very nature of the world, and thus extended philosophy in many areas, should take a crash course in world politics. America has seen a drastic spike in domestic jobs being outsourced to developing countries, not just because it's way cheaper to pay slave wages to dictators, but also in large part due to the overhead of waste disposal. It may not seem like that big of a deal, but EPA standards for waste disposal are extremely costly for large corporations. Anecdotally, when I worked for a small print shop, hands down the largest single expense the owner had to pay for was waste disposal. Old Mr. Shooter used to get ill when it came time to foot the bill for the waste from the old Heidenbergs to go out. I can't tell you exactly what it was per drum, but I remember the bill one time running pert near 10 grand for a single trip, with several 50-gallon drums being hauled off to probably be processed down into some tradable commodity or the other, or perhaps buried deep in some hole in the desert. Who really knows? And let's not forget the creation of the American Dental Association in order to allow aluminum manufacturers to dump their toxic waste into our toothpaste and drinking water forevermore in the form of sodium fluoride. The point is, our entire world economy and geopolitical structures are founded upon the underlying assumption that life is a freak accident of nature, the Earth is just a speck of dust in infinity, and science somehow has it all figured out. It is the underlying consensus that the layman need not worry himself with the affairs of learned men of theory, the pinnacle of whom is undoubtedly Albert Einstein, who never bothered to correlate his thought experiments to real-world experiences, yet his musings are regarded as scientific fact forevermore. For example, the infamous equation.
The infamous? Infamous?
Infamous?
E equals mc squared belongs strictly in the realm of pseudoscience, or even under the banner of a fairy tale, as it inherently asserts that which cannot be demonstrated by its very nature. Never will human technology accomplish the acceleration of some bit of matter at the speed of light squared. It is mere conjecture which purports that an object accelerated near the speed of light will experience time differently than an object relatively at rest, nor is there any experimental evidence to suggest that such an object, when, if accelerated to the speed of light squared, would simply become pure energy. In the infinite void of space-time theory, there is absolutely nothing which stands absolutely still, as all matter was birthed from the hypothetical Big Bang, meaning everything is constantly in mind-boggling motion. And of course, the Big Bang is the theory from whence nothing randomly decided to manifest everything in the universe into an area the size of a pinhead, which then exploded and randomly organized itself into diffuse nebula clouds, which by nature cannot exist in a vacuum, then randomly organized itself into stars and planets, and finally self-replicating life forms, which only have the illusion of purpose and uniqueness, but are really just the result of chance, chaos, and some freak accident of natural chemistry. And a bit of luck, of course. For a so-called lifeless planet to have been created by chaos and happenstance is one thing, but to create life on such a place is another. The hypothetical planet Earth is indeed very lucky when you think about it, though. We're just close enough to the sun that our water doesn't remain in a frozen state, just far enough away that it doesn't boil off into gases. Not to mention just the right size for that distance to allow for temperate climates and convenient-to-life liquid waters. Remember, if you adjust the size of a theoretical planet Earth, then the gravitational constant would throw our temperate barometric pressure of 14.9 pounds per square inch out of whack, and then you would have to have a different distance to the sun in order to make that work in our temperate little Goldilocks zone, as they say. Very lucky indeed. And the peculiar fact that the sun and the moon appear to be identical in angular size to the lay observer, yet we cannot trust our senses in a globe land, for the sun and moon are precisely 400 times different in size, but also precisely 400 times different in distance. Thus, we are presented with the illusion that the sun and moon might somehow be the same or similar or somehow connected, when in fact they are nothing alike whatsoever, and even entertaining such a thought somehow makes one stupider than he was before. Random chance and chaos have, of course, placed the sun and the moon at such unlikely sizes and distances, tantamount to winning some sort of cosmic lottery. But of course, this illusory effect probably happens an infinite number of times in the hypothetically infinite universe theory, so it isn't that big of a deal. But of course, that's not the only amazing coincidence you must swallow in order to humor the globe Earth theory. We are only ever presented, remember, with one single face of the moon at all times throughout all of recorded history. It is proclaimed by GlobeTards that this is due to the fact that the moon orbits the Earth in exactly 27.32 days, but the moon also spins once upon its axis in exactly 27.32 days. This would be way too much of a coincidence when coupled with all the other coincidences we just mentioned we're expected to subscribe to, so the theory of tidal locking was invented to conveniently apologize for this amazing coincidence, which is to essentially assert that the waters sloshing around on planet Earth somehow have the peculiar and unique ability to affect the directional orientation of the surface of the moon some 250,000 miles away, according to them, via the undetectable, unmeasurable pull of gravity. Whenever the theory of gravity is questioned or refuted, invariably the GlobeTards will bring up the astute observation that, were I to jump off a building, I would certainly plummet to my death, thanks to the theory of gravity. Of course, the fact that high-density objects will indeed fall, while relatively lower-density objects will rise above them, are not contested in the slightest by any flat earther. The notion that gravity around a spinning ball is the cause of this natural phenomenon is indeed refuted. The fact is, what goes up must come down is a valid, cogent, and astute observation, which always occurs in nature under normal circumstances, and thus can indeed be considered to be an immutable law of nature. Flat earthers are not in the business of disagreeing with such laws. Quite the opposite, really. What is, however, contested is the notion that objects fall due to the theory of gravity, which fundamentally hinges upon the assumption that the world is a ball, where all nearby matter is attracted towards its center. For some reason, balltards contend that the fact that higher density objects find their natural place of equilibrium relatively lower to the ground than relatively lower density gases or objects is somehow exclusive to a spherical Earth. In contrast, reality dictates that were the world a spinning ball, it would thus be a centrifuge, and the last thing one would expect would be to see this sort of organization of matter. Were you to house varying density liquids in a centrifuge, higher density liquids would find their place of equilibrium further from the center than the lower density liquids. Yet, we're expected to believe that gravity, the weakest of all natural forces, as they say, is somehow strong enough, and let's not forget smart enough, and also undetectable enough to force the opposite arrangement upon the centrifuge Earth in theory. And pray tell, at what point exactly does gravity cause mass to become attracted to other mass spontaneously without any sort of magnetic field involved? Why do we not see gravity with, say, small particles of flour or salt around larger objects all the time, such as bowling balls? And since we do not see such evidence of gravity on the micro level here in reality, how then can science claim that gravity formed the stars and the planets out of diffuse nebulous clouds? There is a conundrum here, and there is always a conundrum when it comes to globe-Earth alliance. And of course, these conundrums cannot and will never be answered by the religion of scientism, so the question is simply avoided, and the dogma of random creation from nothingness is espoused and defended by Team GlobeTard ad nauseum. And again, we must subscribe to all of these things as being coincidental, with the largest coincidence being the planet Earth, in theory, has life upon it, which is claimed to happen once every, many hundreds of millions of planets, so aren't we lucky indeed to have life? But couple that with all these other assumptions that we must swallow in order to believe in the ball Earth theory, and it really becomes quite unlikely and in fact ridiculous. Finally, we are all walking, talking proof of an intelligent designer, a creator if you will. The notion that our DNA randomly manifests by chance coincidence is patently absurd. Equally absurd is the notion that we are all riding upon the side of a spinning sphere in the infinite theory of space-time in 4 or 5 different directions at once along great curves of hypothetical orbit. The Earth, our home, is, as far as we can tell, the only physical plane of its sort in all of the universe. The entire concept of an infinite universe is not backed by anything but fantasy and theory, and the heavens are, as far as we can tell, definitely not infinitely distant suns housing many potential planets and many potential worlds, but are instead merely local lights, a mere feature of the world itself, local lights above us which circle around a common center, not the Earth spinning around in infinite space. So GlobeTards, please consider and respond to some of the following facts before continuing with your incessant attacks against our intelligence, sanity, and integrity. Not only is the world perceivably flat and motionless, but every point made supposedly in favor of the ball Earth theory has either been completely refuted as fallacious, or at best can be shown to work under the assumption that the Earth is a motionless plane as well. So for a simplex example, we see the northern stars apparently circle around Polaris once every 24 hours. It can be assumed that we are spinning with our central axis point ever aligned to Polaris, in spite of axial precession somehow, or it can be assumed that we are stationary while the stars apparently spin around the central point of Polaris. Either notion can be humored with varying supporting evidence, but it is only Team GlobeTards who claim such points as exclusive to their theory. Such pseudoscience and unfair playing is inimical to the sacred process that is the scientific method of discernment, or better still, the zetetic process of reasoning, and is also a disservice to humankind for the remainder of history, until and unless such blatant blemishes in the scientific record are corrected or really stricken altogether. It is also the ballers who claim that ships appearing to go over the horizon somehow proves a ball Earth, when the originators of such evidences were completely ignorant of light's refractive nature, rendering any and all assumptions about distant ships null and void. The flat earthers are held to impossibly high standards, and we're expected to explain every portion of the hypothetical universe theory, which is held in dogmatic fairy tale status by the GlobeTards.
So you're saying the sun is not 93 million miles away? If that were true, it would take up the entire sky, because it's almost 1,000,000 miles in diameter, you silly flat tard.
Well, but we're not saying the sun is that large. Actually, you're the one saying that.
Okay, well, prove to me the sun isn't a ball some 1,000,000 miles in diameter made up of the lightest gases known to humankind, which are undergoing hot atomic fusion, some 93 million miles away from us.
Well, could you prove to me that the sun is all that?
Well, science says that it is.
And this is the sort of logical fallacy we must deal with when arguing against globe earthers, who often do not even understand exactly what it is they believe. Has anyone traveled to the sun, let alone the practically infinitely distant stars, to verify their distances and to take a sample? No. So how can you tell me that you know the size and the distance, and yes, the weight of stars, which you cannot even verify the very distance or the density of, without just a buttload of assumption and conjecture?
Well, because science tells me that it's true.
Do you understand that science is not supposed to reinforce non-verifiable, non-falsifiable whims of ancients, but is instead supposed to be a process to discern the truth, really based on process of elimination and upon what we can tangibly verify? At the end of the day, it is exactly the opposite of consensus which happens to be the truth of this matter. Those who question what is asserted by the pillars of science are the skeptics, and indeed the intelligent of this conversation, while those who read the science books and repeat what they've read and indeed teach their contents are the definition of ignorant and the polar opposite of skeptical. Our so-called educational system is designed to create a non-thinking, subservient class who do not question authority. If you do not fit into this system, you simply cannot make it in the reality which the ruling class have rigged for us. You may be able to squeak by for a while, but in order to toe the modern line, one must conform to the status quo, keep your head down, work like a slave, and refrain from rocking the boat. On the other hand, should you desire to fundamentally change the world by showing really one person at a time that the world that they've been brought up to believe in is a total lie, which fundamentally affects the way we view ourselves and thus view one another. If a man sees himself as an insignificant accident of chaos, or sees the world itself as the same, it is not really possible for him to see the unique importance of his neighbor, let alone his enemy. The stark fact that our realm is one of paramount importance in the grand scheme of things is equally comforting to the truther as it is frightening to the oligarchy. This is why we see the current redoubling of efforts by social media giants to put the cats back into the bag, as it were, when it comes to certain topics like 9/11 truth and the resurgence in flat earth research and scientific progress in that realm. Let's see just how far YouTube in particular will go to quell the burgeoning topics of fake space and globe earth skepticism. Rest assured, the larger the action taken by YouTube, the larger the reaction by truthers, which will ripple through reality in response. Okay guys, thanks so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you'd like to help me continue making flat earth content, please consider making a one-time contribution through PayPal to www.paypal.me/themorguile, or a recurring monthly contribution through Patreon at www.patreon.com/themorguile. God bless you guys. Thanks again for watching, and as always, spread the word, spread the world, and peace out, everybody.